All right, everybody. So thank you for joining us again for this Hostel Chat. So last week on our Hostel Chat, we talked about flexible non-refundable rates. So I just wanted to tell you guys that we're writing a blog post about it, which we're going to launch pretty soon. So if you'll stay tuned so you can read it. If you haven't been in the last Hostel Chat, we're also going to have a link to the recording of that same call in the blog post as well. So just a few things. So we're going to, our idea with these Hostel Chats is that we're going to give you some tips that we find are useful for you to apply to your hostels. And then we'd like to have your feedback. What do you think about this? If you think this would be useful or not. In order to do that, feel free to unmute yourselves and jump in after Lior give the tip. Lior, so go ahead. Today we'll be talking about pricing. So Lior, the floor is yours.
As Beatrice said, we're going to be talking about prices. I think it's a pretty broad conversation. Pretty much the main thing that I want to discuss and get across to everyone is the risk of entering into a price war. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but aside from that, there's other things we want to talk about while taking into consideration the pricing of the hostel currently and as we get out of, or as we start bouncing back from the COVID crisis. So again, the most important thing is to not get in a price war. I'm sure many of you have seen price wars in your markets. You know what they're like. And now is the perfect time for markets to start getting into a price war. Unfortunately, the concept that most people have when they're pricing is the lower my prices, the more of the market share I'm going to get. So if my average price in my city is 20 euros, if I lower down to 15, I will be more attractive and I will win the biggest part of the market share. Another thing that people think is that if they lower price, they're going to increase in occupancy and see a demand where there isn't one. Now, this is a perfect example. There is no demand right now because of COVID, people being locked in, don't know when they'll be out. The demand is pretty much zero. So it's a perfect example of lowering your price right now in half won't make people come to you just because your price is at half price. Now, unfortunately, some people in some markets will see that their competitors will start doing that. And this is what starts a price war. So first of all, yourself, don't lower your price without justification, we'll say. Don't lower it just thinking that it will bring demand or that you'll get a bigger part of your market share. And then watching out the competition that they don't start lowering price. Now, what can you do if they start lowering price? Obviously, you can't be overpriced in your market. I would suggest that this is why it's important to be on top of it and make sure that you're tracking your competition, see if they are changing their prices. And when they do change their price, you can possibly, depends on the relation in your market, but many times I've seen owners and managers reach out to one another and start talking about this and make sure that they don't lower the price. What they need to understand is that if they lower their price, you're going to lower your price, somebody else is going to lower their price, and then eventually, instead of everyone being at 20 euros or 21 or 19, everyone's going to be at 9, 10, 11. You're going to get the same amount of reservations because, again, the demand is what it is. You can't panic when you only have 10% occupancy and just lower the price thinking that's going to get you more demand. The demand will remain the same, but everyone's price is going to be lowered, and thus everyone's revenue is going to be lowered as well. So communicate that to people that you see lowering their price and try to get into a collaboration. I just had this week a call with one of my clients, and now this is another debate because it's not technically legal, but in their market, they're getting together and they're discussing a minimum price for the market. This is a perfect time to do this. I'm not advocating for the illegality of creating a minimum price because that is illegal in many markets. But definitely if you collaborate together and discuss these issues of not lowering the ADR of the market. So just as a good example, this client has a very strong high season. Now, they're hoping that in August, because it's a beach destination, that they will still have some demand, whether they're going to be at 100% occupancy like usual, or whether they're going to be at 50% or 20%, as long as they're open and selling. The issue was they were starting to discuss in the market about a minimum price. And the minimum price when they started was going to be lowering to 14 euros year round. Now in high season in this market, they sell at 25 euros. So my advice to them was, why would you lower your high season price? Again, the demand is what it is. If somebody's willing to go to your beach destination in August, it's not because you're at 15 euros. It's because they feel safe and they're going to go. And so they will still pay that 25 euros that they would have paid last year. So there's no use in everyone just lowering their price saying, okay, well, because of COVID, we'll just lower our price. No. I mean, they did end up going with a minimum that was less than 25, less than last year's, because you don't want to keep your price over, especially if other satellite cities and destinations have a price that's much lower than yours, which might take away demand from your destination. So they do have a little bit of lower than last year, but they definitely didn't lower it to something that's not necessary for a high season. And then when they're talking about low season, then the price lowers from there in reflection with last year. So that's the most important message that I have to bring out there, is not entering into price war. We're going to start talking about some other things as well that have to do with prices. But meanwhile, I see Pam has her hand raised. So we're going to kind of open up the floor to talk about price wars and what you can do to avoid lowering the ADR in your market. Go ahead, Pam.
Can everybody hear me? Hi, everybody again. For the new ones, I'm Pam from Spanky Mid Hostel, Zagreb, Croatia. I'm loving what you're saying, Lior, and it's just a follow-up question, because I had this idea that I wasn't sure, was it okay? I was kind of thinking, first of all, in Croatia or in Zagreb or whatever, we have certain association of hostels or something we were a part of, which is inactive, active, that's a whole other story. But what I wanted to do as an idea was actually to reach out to hostels they're still running or planning to run, hopefully in future, to sit down and actually have exactly that conversation about not getting in a price war. Because if we follow your logic and everybody's logics, all the webinars I've been looking at is exactly that. Don't lower your prices crazy, because that it's not a solution long term. But what if we follow that, but 5 others don't? My question is, since I'm getting idea that it's okay to do that, to just reach out as a friendly thing. Hey guys, do you want to meet up for like a coffee and a conversation? My question is actually, this is maybe not an easy question. What percentage of lowering the prices you consider? Because for example, we sometimes do have higher prices talking in a normal environment, because we have a free pool. We're the only city hostel that has a pool. So we kind of are very aware who our exact competitors are. Maybe the next door is cheaper, but they're a party hostel. They're doing different things, right? So we're kind of competitors, but we're not. So in a idea of like, let's say 10 hostels talking to each other, what would be, let's say, a conversation to have? Let's say, let's put 10-15%, lower the prices for start. Like, is there any idea of average discount for start that you would recommend?
So I wouldn't recommend any discount, just because first of all, I think it's a really good time right now and a really good opportunity. I've already seen this happen, and I'm sure it's happening in your market, that hostels are starting to talk to each other locally, because we're all in the same boat. We're all struggling. So people are creating WhatsApp groups for their own city, for their own country, for their own region. So I think it's really important to hop on those. And if those are not available, to create them, to reach out to people, to get them together as you do this crisis management together. So they're going to see that really we're working on this as a market or as a city, and focus the conversation on what can we do to optimize our bounce back from COVID. So one of those conversations will be prices. And so it should be, this should be discussed, and whether it's a minimum price or a guideline or something that you would like to discuss in keeping in mind for the ADR of the city. But I wouldn't suggest like, yeah, guys, let's all go down 20% because of COVID. That doesn't make any sense. It's let's try to keep the rates from last year. Now, it's also with my client, for example, that we were talking about it when we were talking about agreed prices. I told them right away, take into consideration how you compare to your competitors. Same with you, Pam. If you see that you have better services, you have more facilities, you have more to offer, let's say you have set a minimum or you've agreed that, okay, we're going to try to keep under, you know, like no lower than 15 euros, for example. You should not be at 15 euros. Because what's going to happen is your competitors that are lower rated than you, that don't have your facilities, they will then want to back out of that agreement. They'll say, well, that makes no sense, because if you're at 15 and I'm at 15 and you're getting all the clients and I'm getting none of the share of the pie, and then they back out of any agreements and they stop talking to you. So you don't want to do that, because it's okay not to get all the market share. You need to get your fair market share. So if the minimum is 15 and you're usually, with your usual strategies, you're 20, 25% higher than your competitors because of your services and facilities, keep that. Maybe make it a little bit lower so it's 15%, because again, it kind of depends on if before you were at 20 ADR, now you're at 15, the percentages there will also change. But keep that in consideration, that you should not be fighting for the minimum price if you're a better hostel or have other services and facilities, yeah?
Thank you so much for that.
Cool, no problem. Dror, I think.
Still cannot. All right, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, awesome. I couldn't mute before. Okay, so I hate to be the one who does that, but first I want to mention a few things that I think are important. I'm saying no price war is one thing, but saying not reducing prices is probably different. First, most people are in the same situation we are. When we come out of this, same as everybody else, everybody's going to have less money. I think expecting people to pay what they paid before when we come back is probably not realistic. I think the first one to know that is the 5-star hotels in your city, who would probably go down by probably 50%. They will have like their automatic revenue management systems that will just drop their prices. Then the 3-star hotels might even go to our level. And same as in Palm's case, you might be the only place with a pool that is a hostel, but what when like there's a 10 3 or 4-star hotels pricing the way you used to do before coronavirus, and they all have a pool and spa and whatever other services. I think this will force us into some extent to take our prices down. More than that, I think that word of mouth that I think a lot of us kind of depended on to some extent will dissolve a bit, because it used to be that, at least for us, we'll have somebody staying here. I'm currently in Buenos Aires, for example, then going to Rio, meeting somebody else who's traveling in Rio, telling them, oh, go to Loki, and then they will come like 3 weeks afterwards to Loki. Perfect, except for the fact that that doesn't exist anymore, because we'll have a period of not like a couple of weeks, couple of months. We're going to have a couple of probably a good few months, maybe a year or two, before those people will start coming back. So that regular word of mouth would not work as much, especially when people like travel habits might change. Another thing I wanted to say is that first, the price war is guaranteed, I think, in this situation when we all do the same thing. So I think uniqueness and being different, and like Pam mentioned, is a big difference, and that can avoid some of the price war. But I also think that the way we react now, if we're talking about last week, about the Italian hostels like a lot of hostels not wanting to do return non-refundable. I think same as if we lost a flight and are not getting that flight back, we will say, okay, I'm not flying with that airline anymore. It might work for some of our customers who couldn't get money back from us and say, I'm not going to this hostel anymore. And I want to finish with something very important. The reason that collaboration that you said is illegal, and I think it's illegal in most countries, is the reason when you go to the supermarket, the prices are the ones that you can afford and not like 5 times higher. The reason that collaboration is illegal is because it's good for the customer. And if we sit, as I've seen in a lot of places, hostel groups, hostel associations, sit down and say, okay, minimum price is X, I think we're mostly fucking our customers over, which means that in the end, we're mostly fucking ourselves over. Pretty much it. Thank you.
So first of all, just I'm not sure if I got everything, but for example, what you said about five-star hotels and other providers, I guess we'll call them, or other segmentations of accommodation, you definitely need to be on top of that, because it's true that the other, like Airbnbs might lower their price, and that will force you also to lower your price. I will say that yes, hotels will probably start lowering their price. I have a feeling, or I hope anyways, that hotels, especially 5 stars, have good revenue management and have a foundation of revenue management. And it's very well known in the revenue management field that lowering prices or entering into a price war is the wrong thing to do right now. So hopefully hotels will follow that and they won't do it. Airbnbs might lower their price. You might see also that a lot of people just might, in Airbnb, it's an instinct that I have, that some will not want to host people in their home for 10 euros a night anymore, because it's just not worth it for them anymore. So they might have a limit of what they're willing to lower. Another thing is that I really do think that the people that book hostels are going to continue to book hostels. They're looking at those. I wouldn't want to go to a 5-star hotel when I'm backpacking through the Balkans, because that's just not how I do things, and I go to hostels. So hopefully we'll still be able to keep our own market share within the hostel. About the word of mouth that you mentioned, yeah, definitely. I mean, this crisis is going to affect our occupancy, and the lack of the word of mouth and people that are currently traveling that will bring you in new customers is definitely down. But I'm not sure how that would necessarily affect the value or the price. I do agree with you that, yeah, people are going to be able to afford less. So lowering the ADR in the market, I guess it depends on your market and the people that come to your market. I don't think that, 20 euros for a dorm bed in a beach town is something that people are not able to pay to go and have a vacation. So, but it depends on you and your market. I think there was a question here. Beatrice?
Yeah, I'm replying to Lorenzo about the non-refundable rates.
Okay.
And also Luba says that their usual customer is not going to have the same budget as they used to have. On a good side, the new customer who used to stay at hotels might switch to hostels, as it was in 2009.
Yeah, this conversation I had with the client when we were talking about what prices to put, I don't know if that's the case, because I think the hotel customer is probably going to be more not willing now to go and share rooms. So I think if they're not open to that already in general, then they probably won't decide, okay, well, now I can't afford a hotel, so I'll go and I'll share a room with people, especially with this virus going around or uncertainty. So hopefully it does bring in some more people, because I do see that, yeah, the same thing where people might not be able to afford their usual choice and will then adapt to hostels. Hopefully that'll be the case. Anyone else? Or Beatrice?
I'm seeing what Cash wrote now. Curious to know, with the restrictions on social distancing that was mentioned in the last chat, some hostels mentioned that things like the common room will become difficult.
Yeah, I think actually we ended the last call with this, and I wanted to say something that I didn't with the last comment. The last comment was about if the government imposes restrictions on the dorm rooms and on the cooking facilities and on common rooms. I have a feeling, I could be wrong, but historically hostels have been overlooked. So as long as we don't raise our hand and say like, hey, so what should we do with our common kitchen? And hey, what should we do with our dorms? I think as long as we don't mention that and we don't put up a flag, I have a feeling that most governments will lay out conditions for hotels. So maybe let's say they say you can only have 50% occupancy from what you used to sell. You can only sell 50% of that, let's say. But they're not, I doubt that unless we make them aware of it, that they'll remember, oh yeah, there's the hostels. So they should only, there should be no more shared rooms, or they should be, you know, like 2 meters between each bunk bed. I doubt they'll think about it. It's possible, but I really hope not. Benedita?
I think that if people choose a hostel to come, they won't be afraid of common rooms and common kitchens. If they choose a hostel, they know that they are going to live on each other. So maybe we can provide some masks for people to use when they're having, I don't know, we have to think about or the gel to clean their hands and so on. But people that go to hostels, they are not afraid of the coronavirus. If they are, they won't go to hostels.
Yeah, but I think the problem or the issue, the concern people had was what the government will impose on the hostels, like limitations. As for your own hostel,
as you said, they won't mention it. They will say
yeah.
how hotels can be open or not be open, and unless someone alerts for it, they won't.
Yeah, that's my feeling.
They won't.
I think that's what's going to happen. And as for what we do or the measures that we take in the hostel and how we protect our guests and everything like that, I think that's a great conversation for later when we're allowed to open and we see the actual limitations that we do have to follow. And then, you know, the current situation of the hostel and the people that are traveling to the hostel. And then we'll have to have those debates, I think, later to talk about, do we need to take measures? What measures do we take? How do we make people feel safe? But I think you're right, Benedita, that most backpackers that come to hostels and they continue to come to hostels, it's because they're not overly afraid. You know, I know of situations of hostels that are currently open. They have long-term stays there for people that can't get home. It's a normal hostel functioning at 25% occupancy, but it's like they've created a community and people are not afraid. In fact, they already resigned to the fact that if there isn't COVID in the hostel, there probably will be, and everyone will be infected. And it's not about the fear for that. It's just taking the social responsibility to not affect other people outside of the community of the hostel. And that's about it. It's, I don't think they're worried about like, oh, but I'm going to get COVID, so I can't be here. At least the ones that are there. Pam, you have your hand up.
I'm sorry, it's me again. I just wanted to share, for example, the situation just happened today to Benedita and everybody else interested. So for example, Swanky had a few people who got kind of stuck. We got all stuck together. We'll find whatever, we're taking precautions. But now we had a new girl come in. We put her in a different wing of the hostel, and of course a lone dorm room with shared bathroom. We're gonna clean the bathroom daily, but we gave her like a little package of things for her to take care of herself. We made a special spray bottle that we've been using for a month already, specific disinfect things. And for the moment, she's been also, by the way, isolated for a month. She seems fine and everything, temperature we measured and all. But for the moment, we're kind of asked her to tell us when she wants to, for example, use the kitchen. We keep the distance from her. We disinfect everything after her use. There's a volunteer standing across the room. Luckily, we have a big kitchen. And when she leaves, we disinfect everything back. So just my 2 cents about this. And I think Oksana asked, or somebody, about special offers for people who canceled reservations. This is going back to the previous chat we had last week. Again, I'm repeating what I said then, is I had situations today. We created a special voucher. You can go through to this campaign that is going on, Adopt a Hostel, with Budget Traveler, Hostel.Consulting, and Stay the Night they're doing. So we're basically offering everyone to use this voucher, no matter where they direct bookings or through OTAs, non-refundables, whatever. We're giving them a voucher made specifically for them to use by the end of 2021. that's it from here. Thank you.
So we also had another question from Lorenzo asking if we think they should change the dorms dimension. So for example, I assume he's talking about something in turning the 10-bed dorm into a 5-bed dorm and charging double the price they would charge as a 10-bed dorm normally.
Sorry, so we're talking about making a smaller rooms. I mean, like smaller occupancy. So actually, I'm glad we're getting back into pricing. I do think we need to talk about COVID. It's important to talk about it and how to deal with it in the hostel. I just want to make sure that we talk about bouncing back with the pricing as well. And one of the things I did want to talk about is the dorm room sizes and how we might be able to optimize sales with the gaps between the dorm rooms. So first of all, I'll give you the old mythology that I used to have with the dorm room prices, just to kind of bring it into perspective. Let's say you had a 10 dorm room, a 6 dorm room, and a 4 dorm room. Or actually, to make it even easier, I'll say 8, 6, and 4. So if you have an 8 dorm room, 6 dorm room, and a 4 dorm room, usually what I would have recommended is that your price gap between the 8 and the 6 be higher, more of a difference, than between the 6 and the 4. So it's something I call the popcorn theory. When you go to a movie theater, you have the small, medium, and large. Nobody wants the small because it's just not enough. And then the medium is a big difference between the small and the medium. But the medium and large, it's only like 50 cents or €1 more. It's a very small amount. And what that does is the psychology of this, that people will not want the small, so they'll just ignore it. They'll go to the medium and see a price difference of, let's say, €4. And then when they see the price difference for the large of only €1, they say, oh, that's an awesome value. And they buy the large. So it's a good way of getting people to upsell into your smaller dorms or your more pricey dorms. Now, one thing I wanted to throw out there and discuss is, I think now I'm having a shift in my strategy. I don't know because this is untested, but now with COVID, I'm thinking maybe people will want the smaller dorms because they will feel that it's safer. I don't mean small as in smaller in size. I mean small as in like there's less people, so there's less chance of infections. Now, in order to optimize the upselling for that, it could be that the popcorn theory works out really well for that, because if you increase the gap between your 8 and 6 and you push people into the 4, they're more likely to book that 4 than the 8. But I also think now that if you reduce all the gaps, and let's say, for example, your 8 dorm room is at €20, your 6 dorm room's at 21, and your 4 dorm room's at 22. If the gaps are lower, I think maybe it'll incentivize people to go to book with you and not with your competition, because you give them more safety or the room that they want at a cheaper price. So it's just kind of something that I've thought of as I was thinking about pricing coming back from COVID. Obviously, it's not been tested. We haven't been in the situation before, so I'm not sure if it would work. If anyone wants to comment on that or give their opinions, I knew Jor would be one of them. Go ahead, Jor.
All right, I believe not what you thought, but something we've decided to do ourselves is to actually not reduce the number of beds in the rooms. It kind of relates to the previous question, but I actually believe that there will be regulation on the hostels, because the regulation, it will be taken from, probably not from necessarily just hotels, but also from restaurants and bars and places like that. And there might be a requirement to only have 50% occupancy. If you have 4 beds in a room, you might be required to have just 2. If you have 10 beds in a room, you might be able to have 5. So moving from 10 to 5 now might end up that 5 will only be able to put 2 people in them now. So I think like leaving it as it is now, at least till we know better and actually have some regulations, would be a mistake to make the effort to make changes that might actually hurt us later. That's it.
Yeah, very good point. I like it.
Hi guys.
How's it going?
Sorry for joining later. Late, sorry. So do you hear me well?
Yep.
Brilliant. So I must say that for me the debate on the pricing difference between the different dorm rooms is almost not relevant, in my opinion, until, let's say, a year from now. I think in the first 6-8 months, maybe a year from once the moment that we can actually open, the whole point would be just to fill up the beds any way you can, and the regulations will be really local. I think some countries there won't be any regulations. Some countries that are generally more regulated, like I don't know, Germany or the US, will have a specific regulation for these countries, and it will be more. And anyhow, it will be more dependent on domestic travel than international travel, because travel would be expensive and slower and limited. So for this, I actually would consider doing a totally different strategy, the way we did pricing 10 or 15 years ago, meaning you have one price for the dorm throughout the time, weekend, weekdays, everything is similar, only maybe to have, like for a holiday, a different price, and to set the pricing ahead for, I don't know, 6 months, and don't play with it and don't touch it. I think the effort that would be required for this wouldn't be the right place to put the energy, at least not in the first few months. Not to say that there isn't any relevance to revenue management anymore. There will be, but it will be more about defining the product and finding the right ways to offer it and to sell it, rather than to be sure that you have the demand and just play with the pricing. It's more about creating the demand, but not through price.
Yeah, so Yaron, first of all, I hate to disagree with you, because I don't usually disagree with you.
That's fine.
But I think that the price gaps within the dorms is relevant. It definitely is not the priority, but I do think that, I'll give you an example. Many times in low season, when people are fighting for the market share, which is what we're going to be doing, we're going to be fighting for, like you said, getting as many reservations as possible. And many times in low season, when I see people fighting for market share, as their revenue management or overseeing the revenue management, I have seen that when, for example, all the dorm rooms become the same price, so there's no more gaps, yes, Pam, it affects, it kind of incentivates people to book with you, because, for example, when they rate shop and they look at Hostel World or they look at Booking or whatever, and they look by price, if they're looking by price, they enter on your profile because you're a 15 euros, and they enter on another profile because they're 15 euros, and they compare them with the ratings and such. And if they see that yours is 15 euros, not only for the 12 dorm room, but also for the 4, and they like 4 dorm rooms, they book with you instead of your competition. So it is a very good technique when we're talking about getting more market share. For example, that's why I was saying, if we lower the gaps, not saying completely remove them, but if we lower the gaps between the room types, it might be something that your hostel can do to differentiate themselves from the market and get more of a market share. So it's definitely something to think about. I also think that revenue management, I kind of disagree with you there, that revenue management is very important right now. Now, I understand that people can't afford a revenue management right now, or they need to cut costs. And so unfortunately, the work will come down to the owner or the manager that you already have to pay. But the work definitely needs to be done to analyze sales and pickup on a daily basis, to see when the pickup comes, who it's coming from, what's happening in your market, not just in your own hostel. So what's happening in the market? Am I not getting a pickup that's actually happening for some reason? So it's very critical right now to be on top of revenue. I would not set prices for the next 6 months and not change it. It's exactly the opposite. We don't know the situation we're in. You have to take your KPIs, the key performance indicators like ADR and occupancy for the last year, and throw them out the window. Those are not going to help you anymore, because it's not the same situation. What's going to help you is looking daily on the pickup from yesterday, from the day before, from the last week, see who's coming, what are they booking. These are the things you really need to analyze, as well as looking outward at your market and seeing how that's performing, and making the proper adjustments and strategies to capitalize on whatever demand is coming. Like you said, if it's local, whatever, what segmentations are coming in. Now we're hoping to also talk about the actual segmentations, and I'm with you on this one, that the local market is going to be coming back first. And how do we market to that local market? Every country is different. I know in Spain, the local market doesn't look at hostels. If they look at hostels, it's only as a stag party. I'm not sure about Israel. I'm not sure about Germany. So we have to look at each individual local market and what our hostel can do to adapt to that local market.
I think in most countries, pretty much every hostel owner I know would say, I love travelers, I don't want the locals. Doesn't matter which country they are from. Usually you become a bit of a racist towards your own people. But this probably will have to change now if we want to survive. I think the challenge here is that the hostel concept of the dorms is almost not appealing anyhow to locals, or it appeals to the locals that you don't want. The people that want something which is an alternative for housing, the people that are in difficult circumstances in their life but not necessarily fit the hostel atmosphere. And a dorm is usually not for couples, not for families, not for stuff like, like people usually would go to in local travel. So I think that it's also interesting to wonder about the capsules that until a month ago was the big next thing in the industry. Everyone was working on it, was building stuff. Are they relevant now? It's actually secluded from other people, which is good in terms of Corona, but maybe it's, I'm not sure if it's still appealing as it is, because the initial investment is high when it comes to capsules, so I'm not sure if it's relevant anymore. It's also interesting to hear what other people think.
I don't want to be the only one always talking.
Unmute everyone.
That would be chaos. Pam has has volunteered.
I'm so sorry, guys. Like, I'm so annoying, but Yaron, hi. Maybe this is like going in another direction. I just want to put my 2 cents into it. That I was brainstorming a little bit yesterday is about, again, like last time, talking and being positive and praying that hostels, guests, travelers, backpackers, people who we assume traveled a lot in general are more resilient to the whole situation. We're not so scared easily. As soon as a little bit okay, we're gonna have, pardon my French, balls to go and do it. Another thought, except domestic travel, with a lot of us are struggling with, like Zagreb is not, it's a capital, it's a continental part, it's not seaside, so we can't count except business or events, I guess, locally speaking. But what about an idea, like Lior said, forget about your last year statistics. What about starting over, meaning, like I said in the last video we did about like neighboring countries, about maybe countries who were dealing a lot better with the virus, that weren't affected by the economy maybe that bad, maybe transfer our concentration or marketing towards them. Just an idea, maybe to try to recreate, not recreate, sorry, wrong word, like just observe the situation and like have the past there to inspire and like whatever us to build on, but to not concentrate on the past statistics, but maybe try to create new predictions, hopefully in our benefit.
Yeah, I think we all need to be proactive now and think ourselves what is going to be the demand that starts coming first. How can we adapt to that demand? And then we just have to be ready for that. But I wouldn't throw all your eggs in one basket and say, this is what's going to happen, and then make all those changes and then something else happens. You definitely need to have a plan B, C, and D of who you're going to be marketing for if they come back and how you're going to adapt yourself to them. But then you have to look at the pickup and what's actually coming in, not just to you, but in your market, and see what is actually happening, and then take that strategy and adapt to that. Again, it's an unknown situation we're in. Every country is gonna react differently. It is true that the local tourism is going to be the first one that comes back, whether that's tourism or whether that is, I don't know, it could be, for example, big construction workers or an influx in healthcare workers or whatever, but it's going to be local. It's not going to be people coming in from other countries. And how do you adapt your hostel to be able to offer them what they need? Also with a client, we were talking about room types and changing into privates because they thought that people will book more privates. And again, it's like, okay, it's good to predict these things, but as I said to them, I wouldn't make all your changes now. Start and test and see what happens, because let's say in August as a beach destination, what if you would still be full in your dorms with locals, because there's a lot of locals that go to this destination in summer, and if they're your backpackers that would go there anyways, I wouldn't get rid of all your dorms and just create privates that you're selling at a low rate. So take 2 of your six dorm rooms, turn them into private, and see how you're selling them for until June or until July. And then if you want to change it into, if you want to change more privates, or if you see that there's absolutely no pickup in dorms and you want to add more privates, then do that. But don't throw all your eggs in one basket and just completely change everything into privates. And then there is a dorm pickup that you could have capitalized on that you now don't have. Yeah. Anyone else?
We also have there's a question here in the chat from Oksana. She asks, do you think it makes sense to create a special offer for example, the people who cancel the reservation because of COVID?
For the people who cancel the reservation because of COVID. So I think, first of all, we have to differentiate between non-refundable that have canceled. So we've talked about that. So if somebody had non-refundable and they canceled, each hostel does their own thing, but we've discussed giving them a voucher, saying, you know, like, yeah, you've paid for this, it's non-refundable, here's a voucher for you to use within a year time. Some hostels have given back the money because they think that is the fair thing to do, or because Booking.com has obliged them to do that. Some are just being completely rigid and saying, no, it's not refundable, sorry about your luck. That's a completely different debate. But yeah, if somebody made a standard booking and canceled it because of COVID, I think it's a very good opportunity to send a discount maybe and say, like, sorry that this has affected your travels. Here's a 10% discount if you book direct with us when you can travel again. I think that's a very good sales strategy that many hotels implement anyways. It's just to recapture somebody that would have stayed with you, and next time they can come back to the city for whatever reason they canceled, instead of starting to look again and shop around, if they have a coupon from you, it stops them from doing that, and they go, oh, okay, now I'm going to the city and I have this coupon to use. So I think it's a very good suggestion, Oksana, and I would highly implement a strategy of that sort, looking at your cancellations from COVID. And it's something that you can even continue later. When you have a cancellation, send an automatic email and give them a voucher. Sorry, not a voucher. I would maybe just give a discount code for the next time that they come. It's something that you could simply set up in your PMS or booking engine, and you can call it, let's say, a 5-10% cancellation rebooking code, and you can send that code out to people with no limits for all the cancellations. It's something that could be very automatic. It's kind of similar to, I guess, the repeat business, right? I mean, when people say, like, if you come back, you can have 10% if you book direct with us, or if you word of mouth, if you go out there and you want to, you know, recommend us, give them this code or give them this bracelet, and they'll get 10% off if they book direct. So it's a very good initiative, I think. Anybody else to do with sales, or we can talk about else as well?
Yeah, just an idea based on what Yaron asked before for locals. So first, I think us in Loki, we're a bit of the same thought. I think when we started of like preferring foreign travelers, and I think a big change for us started in 2008. That was after we were already opening in a few places for 3 years. And I'm very, very happy that over the years we got more and more of local markets, and it's made a difference. Definitely, it definitely makes low season a lot different as well compared to other places. And I think that's something that, thinking now, it's good to think about, like next year, well, 3 years from now, low season, and not just how do we survive this. So actually approaching locals. And one of the options, definitely Yaron, for you guys in Israel, which is I'm from Israel, and it's a tiny country. Like you can get anywhere nearly within an hour drive. Is to look at locals, even locals from the same city, especially when when you think about most locals that might come to our places, which is the ones we kind of prefer to come, the ones who would be spending in our bars, the one who are going to like take part in our activities and all that. They're not the ones that are actually looking for alternative accommodations. Will usually live in the outskirts of the city, while most nightlife and stuff like that would be in the center of the city. So actually attracting locals by saying, when things open up again, you want to come and have you want to party, you want to go out at night, book with us plus 2 beers at a ridiculously low price, just to fill up the beds, get the people in there, and hopefully that will create extra services sales as well, and then create a local following that will help further down as well.
Oh, was this most of your work with the locals was about the bar or about the accommodation?
We do both. I think that I'll give you we're in Argentina now, we just recently opened, but in Peru and Bolivia, we have a lot of locals that will come from other cities to our places when they're vacation, long weekends and stuff like that. And then during normal weeks and normal times, we'll come to the place we have in the town where they're from for pre-going out drinks, sometimes for just staying overnight. We got it a lot in Buenos Aires as well, of people that used to come to our places in Peru and would now come to here in Buenos Aires, book the night on a Friday or Saturday night, stay in our bar, have a few drinks with everybody else, and then go out with everybody, and then the next day drive back to where they live, which might be just 45 minutes an hour drive, but like for Argentina, that's small. For Israel, it's nearly the other side of the country. So you get both bar and room sales from that.
I would also say that brings up a good point about when you avoid, or one way of avoiding getting into a price war is adding value to your offer. So instead of competing with price, we should be looking as well of how to get a bigger market share by increasing the value of the stay. So that could be with your bar, it could be including breakfast if you don't include it. What can you include to add value to make people choose you over your competition without you having to lower the price? So if you do see that your city's getting into a price war, yes, you may have to follow if you can't convince people and if you can't get it back up, but you can also make added value that helps differentiate you from your competitors.
Lorenzo, you can unmute yourself and awesome.
Okay, so first thing first, I am a groups manager, so I do work in a hostel, but I do guess that it's a little bit different because one of my biggest concerns it's the deposits that I already have of money of my clients that already canceled. Basically, one of my strategies that I'm doing, it's try for the guests to reschedule for this year, next year, even 2022, because basically, and one of the things that I'm trying to do, also because for sure nobody wants to do the refunds, okay, because in all the businesses, basically we were using the money to do another business, and that's how it goes basically. So we are trying to don't do the refunds. One of the things that I'm securing my clients, it's that they are going to have the same rate or even a bigger discount on the rate that I was already giving. So basically, most of the clients that had 10% on the usual rate, they will have the 15%. Do you think this is a good idea? That was my first question. And then my second question eventually is, and for sure when we all open, it's not going to be 100% August, July. It's not going to be 100% like it's normal in Lisbon, not at all. And eventually, even the hostel staff, we don't want it to be 100% because it's all a little bit fresh, okay? So maybe we want to control everything and not having the hostel completely full. So that was also my idea of selling half of the hostel or 2/3 of the hostel, because, well, I do think that most of the guests, they don't want to share a bed with someone that they actually don't know. So that was my second thought.
So I'll try to speak to both of those. First of all, I'm really glad you brought up groups. It's very important to talk about it. Groups is one of the main reasons why the recovery time for lowering the price or the ADR is much longer. If you lower the price now, your ADR, well, if you have a big group department, this is what happens is that groups that have paid 10 euros this year are less likely than to book with you the year afterwards for 20 euros. So that's why it's very important, especially if your hostel is big on groups, to try as much as possible not to lower the ADR. It will take much longer to recover, especially if you rely on groups. Now, for the groups that cancel, we talked about this a little bit last week. I would highly recommend that you, I mean, you're saying that you're avoiding giving them a discount. Now, I'm not quite sure if you're denying them a refund.
Sorry. No. I am obliged to do the refund. Okay.
So,
but the only thing is I'm trying to reschedule and do not do the refund. So basically to put the group in 2021, 2022, right. I don't know.
So what I mentioned last week,
we are doing like a kind of a voucher.
Yeah, what I mentioned last week that I saw that the airlines are doing that's really that's working really well is that even though they're obliged to give you back the money, they'll give you two options. They're like, okay, we can give you back the deposit, or we can apply a voucher for 110% of your deposit to future booking. So that's a good way of making sure, because I like what you said about offering them something more if they just postpone instead of canceling. I would not say I will give you the same price, or we'll give you, I wouldn't base it on the price itself in that moment, because let's say if you say, I'll give you the same price, but you were charging them 20, but this year your rate is actually 10, and you're like, so why are you charging me 20 when your rate is 10? Okay. So that's why if you give them a 10% more value on the credit, and then let your prices be the way they have to be over the next months and years, and then you're not limiting yourself to an argument of, okay, let's say your price is double for some stupid reason. Let's say you've added a pool and you've reinvented yourself, and all of a sudden you're a 5-star hostel, you're no longer a hostel, whatever. And now they say, oh, well, we paid 15 euros a person and we want to still do that because you told us we could. So this is why it's really important to like put in the voucher a percentage and say, you know, like you could say 25% more, but make it really attractive so that they don't ask for the refund. But you have two options. Either you have a refund and I'm obliged to give it to you, or you can take a voucher for this much more of a value, and you can use that on future stay.
And also, for example, what I could also do, maybe, it's like, basically I do have a template that I do give a certain amount of discount. So I can also make price just for cleaners. Like,
Yeah.
instead of doing the 10%, giving 15%, because basically, well, of course that I don't sell April and March from the same price that I will sell August. And that's for sure.
Yeah.
So basically, and sometimes they actually ask us, why are you putting your price different? Well, you are looking for a different rate for sure. So
Exactly.
it is different.
Well, also consider, like I said, the added value. Instead of reducing their price, what you could do is say, you know, like if you book again, or if you accept a voucher, even if it's for the exact amount, we will include X when you come back, right? So you can think about
something. Yeah.
Now, I do want to touch on what you said about reducing the room types. I think, if we're all going to be at 20% occupancy or 40% occupancy, it does make sense what you say. Now, I think, as Dror said, if there's a risk there that if you actually take away the beds and then they put limitations on you, and that limits that room, and also it's a lot of effort. But you could sell your 10-dorm room as a 4-dorm room. You know, you could just, many PMSs can just change the room type, and you just say, okay, well, my 10-dorm is now a 4-dorm for the next month, 2 months, 3 months. I also want to say that if the government does, and this is what I was saying, if the government does put restriction on hotels and say, like, they can only have 50% occupancy, this is where I think hostels will be overlooked, and it's just across the board, you can only be at 50% occupancy. It won't be, there can only be 50% of your room occupied, because they're not thinking of shared rooms. They're thinking of just the accommodation itself and the people.
But in my opinion, if even if it's not the government saying that, the management team can actually say that. They're not going to sell the top beds. We try to do not sell the top beds.
Yeah,
I will actually need to sell some of the top beds, because I do have groups for August. Well, September, nobody canceled September yet. but of course that's and I'm also talking that because I'm also a hostel customer, and I don't want to be sharing a bed with someone that it's not my friend in the next 4 months, maybe. And I am not that kind of guy, but there are a lot of hostel people that are like that are very conscious about it. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to be close to an Italian for the next months. I don't know.
No, but I think it's a very good point that you bring up, because it could be a very good strategy when we come out of this. If we're going to be at 10%, 25%, 30% occupancy, if you market your hostel as a bottom bunk only hostel for the next 2 months, that might be a really good added value and good security feeling, and might increase your market share as well. So I think that's a really good strategy. I'm glad you said it. It's something to take into consideration for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Oh, oops.
Leo, just one thing. I think you mentioned, or Yaron mentioned, I'm not really sure, like a breakfast. And I think maybe it's a topic for different chat, as I don't know how much long we have, but like, what would our services look like after this? As I think that shared breakfast or buffet breakfast probably is going to change a lot when we come out of this, and it just might be something worth talking about.
It's a very interesting topic. So I assume you're talking about like everyone dipping into things and like a buffet style where it's more risky than if it was served to you. Is that correct?
I think most hostels that have any type of served breakfast as part of the breakfast will have some jugs of juice that everybody touches the same jug to serve themselves, or will have like balls of cornflakes or stuff like that. And it's all kind of, it's not necessarily that we all take with our hands from like a shared dish, but still we touch
we're all
the same
touching.
utensils. Like,
So I actually had a conversation about this with a client of mine and this was when it was first starting, like the whole hysteria and, you know, trying to keep the people that we do have and not closing. So before the actual closure, it turned into what measures to put into place to limit exposure to coronavirus. And I think the same debate's going to happen when we start opening up again and coming out of this. Now, my personal feeling to this is that it's not about if you're going to get infected, it's about when you're going to get infected. And it's already being said that, at least in Madrid, where I am, 80 to 100% of us are going to be infected. It's just a matter of not everybody getting infected at the same time when the healthcare system has its own limits and is not able to then take care of everyone at the same time. So it's about spreading out the curve of infection. So if somebody, I mean, let's say your hostel is at 50% occupancy, and the amount of measures that you would have to take so that people do not get infected, like if somebody comes in with coronavirus, for them not to infect anyone else within that community, and then for that not to spread out and infect everyone, is nearly impossible. I mean, if you think of it as a family home, it's one thing if everyone's got their own room and you take turns and disinfect everything, and if you can isolate one person, but in a hostel, that just, it won't happen. It's not something, I remember somebody sent out a manual, and it was like a 10-page, if not more, manual on instructions in the hostel of what to do, procedures and measures to limit exposure or limit the risk of and make the hostel safe. So anyway, my point is that I really think that if you have anybody that comes in with coronavirus into the hostel, will infect everybody. It will happen. Majority of people in your hostel are at the age group that they won't even notice. Some may get a cough. I highly doubt that somebody's going to get sick enough that they'll have to go to the hospital and get and be fed a respirator. But again, I think that serving them breakfast and having one person that has been trained in food safe and health and safety, and that they serve it to them and that they can't touch anything, I think definitely that could be good for the perception of the guest, thinking that, okay, you're doing everything possible for their own safety and security. So I think there's a plus to that if you can do it. But I don't think that we should fool ourselves and think that, okay, we have to serve breakfast so that we don't get people infected when they're sitting side by side each other anyways. They're going to the washroom using the same doorknob anyways. Somebody did wash their hands, somebody didn't wash their hands. It's the breakfast is not going to be what makes it so that they don't get infected. But again, I do think that it's something to take into consideration for the perception of the health and safety of the people that are there. And if you're able to serve breakfast instead of having it buffet style, why not? Go ahead.
If I can just reply to that. So I want to say first that what you ended up with on perception, that's very important. But I also think you somewhat, maybe all of us, kind of like not give enough credit to our guests, our workers, and ourselves, and pretty much from not wanting to insult anybody on the group, but like looking at the videos I'm looking at now, I think most of us are over 30 years, somebody more. I'm sure some of our workers are over 30, over 40, over 50. And I think their safety and their security is just as important. And the person who cleans and the person who serves the breakfast is just as important as the guest who's 20 and doesn't care. And I think that part of the problem I saw, and I mentioned that on a group, on the chat group like a couple of weeks ago, was there are some hostels who really don't care. They keep on having parties every night, even though like they completely ignore social distancing and all that. I think our responsibility is first to our workers and then to our guests. And I think that just saying the breakfast will not be a problem, I think everything will be a problem and everything we need to think of. And we need to think of our families as well. And I don't know if anybody's now in the group has had coronavirus or any of us had symptoms, I'm pretty sure none of us want to end up in hospital just thinking about the selfish part of it. So we're just saying that we will be in that environment and saying that like we don't care and our guests don't care. I don't think that's right. And saying that nobody's at risk, I don't think that's right as well.
Now, first of all, just make it really clear, I'm not saying that I don't care or that people are not at risk. That's not what the message I was trying to get across. But what I'm saying is that there needs to be a lot more measures that are taken into place, except for just changing the way you serve breakfast in order to make it so that it's less likely for somebody to get infected. So of course, if you want to put one person in a room, if you want to make sensors for the doors so that nobody has to touch doorknobs and always keep them open, if you want to take all the measures that are possible, if you want to disinfect your toilets every 10 minutes or after every use and have somebody out there to disinfect after every use, all of those would be great, and you should do all of them to try to limit the amount of spread of the disease. I'm just saying that simply not having a buffet style breakfast is not going to be enough to make it so that that infection doesn't spread. Another thing that I think is very important to note is that the viral load, it seems to be, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a professional, but I've been reading a lot about coronavirus, and it seems that the viral load is also something really important that we need to take into consideration. Now, what that means is that one virus will duplicate. So over the time that the 14 days or whatever it is, until your body fights it off, it continues to duplicate. But it's not the same thing if you get exposure to 1,000 viruses, we'll say, that duplicate and then create 100,000. It's not the same that as if you initially get infected and are in contact with 100,000 viruses that then duplicate into 1,000,000 viruses. So the viral load that you have definitely affects how severe the coronavirus will be. So it is something that we really need to take into consideration, that even though we may not be able to stop the spread, like Dror said, it's not that we should just not care and not do anything. We still have to disinfect and take as many measures as possible so that the spread of the virus, or sorry, the viral load contact that people in our hostel have is reduced. That's very important to take into consideration.
I'd like to add a couple more things on this topic. Lorenzo, do you want to speak before? It's okay.
Go ahead, Johan.
Okay. I think that there's a lot of discussion already in the global industry about a corona-free hotel, or something like this, that that people will look for this certificate to get the secure feeling about going to places like hotels and hostels. And on the one hand, the same way our industry as hostels have evolved and has taken higher measures of cleanliness than before, and being more professional, we as hostels will have to be more professional and more careful about those cleaning actions, whether it's to make sure that our staff will go and wipe those doorknobs all over the place, and will go over all the surfaces a few times a day, and a lot more things that we haven't done so far. With this, I think there will be, again, there's a big difference between the initial phase, which will last, as I said before, 6, 8, 10 months, and what will happen afterwards once, hopefully, a vaccine will come. But until then, it's either you will provide only a room, because this will make it very easier operationally, just a room, and maybe adding kitchens or kitchenettes to your room is something that would make sense, at least for this initial phase. And with this, some of the hotels that I know in Israel and other countries that are actually still operating during Corona, this is what they provide: only a room. The common areas are closed, no interaction between the people, almost no service, but you provide this kind of experience, if you can call it like that. Similar to Airbnb, if I would say, in a way, just in a central building. Another option would be if you want to be open and give all the other experiences that you usually do, like a bar, like breakfast, like even having a living room where people can sit with one another and talk with a minimum of 2 meters or 1 meter from one another, we will have to make those measurements much, much more professional and frequent. And the same way we were all afraid until recently from reviews about bed bugs, we wouldn't be happy to see a review about this place is not taking care of any corona measurements, and people will review about this and say, oh, this place, if you go there, for sure you will get it. So yes, a lot of our customers are young. Yes, probably they will not die from it, but in their heads, once the moment they will go to travel will be the moment of relief, a moment of, okay, that's it, I'm starting a new thing, I'm happy again to be on the road. The last thing they would ever like to encounter was, again, this damn virus. So I think that there will be no option if you want to sell more than a room, and hostels typically sell more than a room, more than a bed. They sell the experience, they offer the experience. We will have to adapt, and we will have to invest much more in this in terms of the cleanliness and other items.
One of the things
1 second, sorry, it's just Luba's had her hand up for quite a while, so I'm going to give her the floor if that's okay.
Thanks a lot. First of all, I agree with everything Yaron is saying. It's super interesting to listen to him because finally I hear someone with the similar opinion with mine. And recently we fight a lot with my partner about what we have to do in the future, how we have to adapt, because I think that we definitely have to do a lot, and the economy is not going to be the same. And just look at Europe, it's not going to open borders within the next year, so we're not going to have any foreign customers at all. And I want to know your guys' opinion about the long-term stay, because, well, let's face it, that is mostly going to be, I don't know, 99% locals. Only the foreigners that stayed before in the country can visit the hostel. Probably, I also would agree that there will be no dorms. And probably the good way to survive would be with the long term. So basically transferring a hostel to some kind of a co-living. Have you ever, any of you guys thought about it? What are your basically ideas about it?
Anybody? What, Luba, if you could actually maybe explain to me what difference you see in a co-living and a hostel, except for the length of stay. Like, do you see, is it private rooms that you're talking about? Is there any other difference except for the length of stay?
Well, let's see, for example, at St. Petersburg, we have about 200 hostels. Some of them are going to die, some of them are going to stay, and the ones who are going to stay, they're going to all say, hey, you can stay with us long term for, let's say, 100 years per month. And we will have to compete with that. So logically, the way we used to compete is being the best. So now my idea that we have to compete with being the best as a long-term solution. So that would mean different facilities. For example, the facilities for co-working, because now we don't have any desks. People usually work at the desk. So we have to think about that. Different kind of activities, different kind of, basically it's not going to be about the cooking class, probably it's going to be about some other kind of activities and classes that would fit more to the customer that we're going to have, which is going to be different. Maybe it's going to be more about IT or creative workers or both of them, but it's going to be different. And of course, we all can put just say that we're going to work with the long stay, but in order to be competitive around all the others who's going to do the same, I think it's not enough. I mean, maybe I'm looking too much ahead and being overly pessimistic, but that's what are my thoughts about right now.
Yeah, we actually touched a little bit on that last week as well, about digital nomads and long-term stays. It's definitely something that's we're gonna have to be looking at. I think we should have a conversation maybe next week, or we'll see when we can fit it in, I mean, we're going to have a call next week, but about the topic, we should talk about segmentations, who we can possibly market for, what are the opportunities that we have out there, and how to market for it. So whether it's long-term stays, staycations, we're talking about families, you know, some people are like, okay, well, we're going to start hosting families so that people have a private room, but with more beds, with more family rooms. I think we should kind of talk about that and see if there's experience out there for people who have tried to market for these segmentations, how they've done it, what's been successful, what we see coming back sooner than others, and what to do with this year where it seems like we're going to be not performing the way we've been performing all these years, that's for sure. And everything's completely changed and we have to adapt ourselves. So I think that would be a great topic for another conversation. Lorenzo, did you have something that you still wanted to say, or?
I wanted to talk about the part of the cleaning and the breakfast that we spoke about. Basically, in my opinion, it's not only, in my opinion, it's just like yours, Lear. Basically, 80% of the people will get infected, okay, or something like that. So, but in my opinion, it's very important that the guest doesn't think that he was infected in the hostel in the first case, and in the second case, even if, because it's impossible for everybody to be 100% COVID free or something like that. I don't even know how that works. Well, because it's impossible to do that. Not even the hospitals are doing that. So eventually, the thing is, in my opinion, it's impossible. It's important that the guest feels that we are concerned about it. So maybe breakfast with packaged breakfast, for example, we could also save some money, because there are always those guys that take 3 or 4 sandwiches. So we could save that in the buffet as well. And in my opinion, it's very important that the guests can see what we are doing about it. So that we are cleaning the linens in the right temperature, that we are doing everything that we can to help them and for them to don't be infected in our hostel. But as you have said, if someone has to be infected, he will be infected, or she will be infected, of course.
So first of all, just to make it clear, it's not that I'm saying that it's okay for everyone to get infected, but I do think it is something, like I said, with the viral load, it's something that we really need to take into consideration. We do need to take measures so that, again, it's not to avoid somebody getting, sorry, I'd love to avoid for someone to get infected, but I think it's unreasonable to think that I can avoid people getting infected. But we definitely can take measures, one, for people to feel safer, but also for them to be safer when we're talking about the viral load. If we're disinfecting more often, if we're taking these measures, whether it's breakfast, whether it's the temperature of cleaning, all these measures will reduce the amount of contact with the virus if you are in contact with it. So that definitely needs to be a conversation. I think what we need to do is, in one of these hostel chats, not the next one, but when we start seeing countries that are getting out of quarantine, when we see what the government is imposing on them, what they're not imposing on them, and then I think once we get to that point where we are able to start reopening, then I think we should have these conversations of, okay, what measures are we taking to make our hostels appear and be safer? I think that's a very important topic, but I don't think it's for today. I think it's better to come more prepared, seeing other examples, seeing what's happening out there. When is it that we're actually going to be able to come out? What are the limitations that we have? What do we have to work with? And how will we adapt to that? Talking about breakfast, when at the end of the day, the government says, okay, you can't serve any food if you're not a restaurant. Well, we've just wasted a whole bunch of time talking about breakfast for nothing because we can't serve breakfast. So yeah, I think it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what limitations we have to work with, and then have a conversation about what do we need to do as hostels to make them feel and be secure. Now, we said these calls are going to take an hour and a half maximum each day. We have 5 minutes. I challenge somebody to say something positive and get us all smiling. So something positive that's happened to you and that's not coronavirus related. Pam?
I think you need to unmute
I'll do it.
her because she has a problem. Yeah.
If it's not, wait, it cannot be connected with Corona or hostels or what?
I mean, if it's connected with Corona and it's funny and positive, sure. I don't know.
No. I'm going to share a personal note. Is that okay with everyone? You can have a laugh on my life. It's okay. Why I was drinking wine? Because I haven't had a successful Tinder date. Social distancing. It was the first date in forever. So yay, Corona is doing something for single people.
It's funny. I just so you know, I had a date last night on Zoom.
Literally, police came to check up on us. It was a funny thing. But a positive thing, job-wise, I literally got 2 emails today from people who wanted to book, and I offered them vouchers and stuff. But in general, they were actually coming from their friends who stayed here a year ago, and they're like, whenever this situation comes back, we want to visit for XY reasons. And of course, I sent them like so much thanks and gratefulness in their emails. Literally, I was surprised, why are you emailing in this time? So there are some crazy ones out there planning their trips, like in August, even April, May, next year, the guy's planning to come. Of course, we don't know if he's going to do it or not, but it just lifts my spirits to open emails and be like, you know what, guys, I want to visit next May for XY reasons. What's up? So I want to give power for those individuals to keep us all in good spirits. And I hope everyone at least gets at least a month. Once a month, it will be enough for me.
Nice.
Great. If you want to hear one more thing, it relates, we've done a newsletter to all past guests. We do it usually every few months. We've done now before the Easter and Passover and all the holiday season. And first of all, the opening rate of the newsletter is like 3 times higher than the regular rate when you send newsletters, because everyone has time to read those emails and everyone is clicking all the videos and the pictures. So we got over almost 40% of the people who actually opened the newsletter, and usually the rate is 10%. So this is really nice, and I think it's a very significant tool to use these days. Second thing is we did add to the newsletter the Adopt a Hostel voucher, and we already got people buying vouchers for over €1,000 because of this this newsletter and the wonderful campaign. So these are 2 optimistic stuff to tell you about. And I think it's a great time to work on the connection with the local community, not only because you will need the domestic traveler, it's also because this is our essence. As hostels, we are connected to the nearby businesses and people and neighbors. This is the time to support one another. And we have resources. We have buildings, we have energy, and we have wonderful employees. We should all use this in any way possible to do good, and hopefully one day to do also some business, but for now just to do good.
Just to clarify, Yaron, was it €1,000 in vouchers or €1,000 vouchers?
People bought 25 and 25 and 50 and 50 altogether.
Okay, the total. Okay, I was like, when I first heard you, I was like, €1,000 vouchers. Like, who bought a €1,000 voucher?
In a dorm, they bought 100 bed nights for all year long in one time. No.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. I'm glad you brought it up. Adopt a Hostel, I think the majority here has heard about it. We're going to be launching, hopefully, probably for sure, tomorrow. When I say launching, I mean the website itself with all the listings. I've been guaranteed that tomorrow will be the date. We've already held a press release, and we're going to be sending out a full press release on Monday. Now, it's really important that I know everyone's really energized and wants to get the word out there, and people are starting to share about it already on Facebook, on social media, on newsletters, on Instagram. Hold off just a couple days because it's really important that when we send the message out there that the campaign is live, that you send the right messages. We're going to give you a marketing kit to tell you what to communicate and how to reach out to your audience. So the biggest support you're going to get are from your own people. We're going to get the news out there to the media, and we're going to get hostel lovers and travelers from all over the world to adopt hostels. But your reach is going to have the biggest impact, meaning, like Yaron said, the newsletter that you send out, the message that you post on Facebook, on Instagram, when you reach your audience, that's the biggest support you're going to get. We want to make sure you do that right. So just wait for the marketing kit to come out and do it right so that you don't send out the message now in a diluted way where a campaign page isn't actually there. People don't really understand. They might do it, they might not. But then when they hear about it again, the proper way, they'll be like, oh yeah, I already heard about this. And then they forget about it. So just hold off a little bit longer on communicating it till we send out the marketing guide, which should be tomorrow with the launch of the website. And then, yeah, if you have any questions, let us know. adoptahostel@gmail.com. And we will probably be holding also another Q&A call, which is going to be separate from this Hostel Chats. It's going to be Adopt a Hostel Q&A for those who are part of the campaign. And we'll probably do it as like early next week once the site is launched, once we have all the PR on it and everything's going out. I see Cash put on his cam, so I don't know if he wants to talk a little bit because he had the PR today.
I just finished.
You don't have to.
I just finished stuffing my face. That's why I didn't want you guys to see. It was just a coincidence.
Okay. No problem. All right, guys. Yeah. So thank you very much for coming. It was great seeing you again. Next week, same place, same time. We'll continue talking. And yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
See you next week.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.